What's up, everybody? Welcome to the High Level Husband Podcast. I'm Tommy McAllister, and I'm joined by my wife,
Dianne.
Dianne, the best. She is the best. Sometimes it's so funny because we'll be into such amazing conversation, and I was like, "Here's what we're gonna, or here's what we should talk about." And we were going back and forth, and I was like, "Hey, we just gotta push play." Because how many times have we done this? You guys want to know backstories? Is like, oftentimes we're in the car just having amazing conversation, or we're building a puzzle and we're having amazing conversation, or we're making food and we're having conversation, and we're like, "Babe, we could have just had like." All of our content for the next 3 months laid out.
At least.
And then we're like, we should write this down. And then we sit down and it's like,
crickets, right?
Yeah, totally. Because it's just now we're on the spot, right? And it's just free flowing. But I mean, that's just part of our growth. And so what we're going to talk about on this one is like the importance of knowing who you are and what you want, right? And when you know who you are, literally, you remove the lid to the jar of limitations in your life and on your, especially on your relationship. We were just kind of talking about that in multiple ways. We're going to dive deep in some stuff. We're actually going to throw a little exercise out there for some of you guys to do that we have our clients do, and it's a super cool one. And we're actually it's something newer we're going to be having them do. And we did this yesterday, but we're going to get into that into a little bit. But we were just talking about something and the importance of knowing who you are. Is recently I held a mastermind with another coach friend of mine, and he leads in some similar areas, but in a little bit different. And then I have my areas, but we're both faith-filled, and not to toot our own horns, but we definitely know who we are, and we are about that life, right? Like there is no wavering. We know we're who we are, which is ourselves, right? And then whose we are, which is God's, right? And we know what we stand for. We know what our core values are. We know our mission statement, what our purpose in life is. We just know that. And I always didn't know that. And I think that Dianne didn't know that.
I really didn't know that.
Well, we just both didn't know that, right? But that's so for anybody who's listening to this who doesn't know that, that's okay. As long as it doesn't stay that way for you. And so I just wanted to start it with a quick story is, like I said, I was put on this mastermind, and one of the people in the room, he can be a little more docile. He was one of like the more, I don't want to say clients, but the clients who were in the room, not as a coach. And he was talking about how his marriage was struggling. And I said, tell me why your wife fell in love with you. And he was like, I don't really know. And I was like, and so then I put in my coach buddy and I was like, tell me why your wife fell in love with you. And he's just like, ding, 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 just starts rattling things off, right? And I'm like, because he knows who he is, right? But if we don't know why our spouse fell in love with us, then we don't know. Then we don't know who we are, right? Because I'll tell you why Dianne fell in love with me, but the cool thing is who I was then, why she fell in love with me, because that was 24 years ago, is somewhat like why she fell in love with me, but like the person I am now was not who I was then. So, I mean, I think there's some similar traits.
Oh, definitely.
A little bit.
Yeah.
But so Dianne goes right now, she goes, well, why'd you fall in love with me? And then
Since we were talking about that, I was like, well, let's question you and see how that's going to go.
Right. And I knew, right. So I was just like, man, you're so compassionate. You're loyal. You're a kind-hearted person. You're funny. And then when I got to funny, she's like, I'm not that funny. And I'm like, well, you are. And I go, what's funny, babe, is you weren't really all that funny majority of our marriage. Like
you've probably rubbed off on me.
I think, so this is what we were talking, love. Is
I think that two become one over time. A lot of times if they have a good relationship, which we do. And so I feel like over time, we've really become one in so many ways. So I feel like our traits of why we probably love each other or fell in love with each other are probably a little bit different now. But I feel like it's because I feel like we have a lot of similar traits of why we fell in love with each other.
Similar vision in life now. We always didn't necessarily, other than just like, hey, we want to raise our kids and, we want to make sure we don't go bankrupt. Like that was like our goals, which is crazy. And I think that's most people's marriages. I would say 99% of marriages, and there's that 1% of marriages that are killing it, right? And that's where we're at. We're killing it. And that's not being bragging. We've just grown to this point, which is why we're marriage coaches, right? And the way we lead. But so I was saying Dianne becoming funny is when she became confident in herself, it gave herself for permission and freedom to just say things and not wondering what other people are going to judge or if I'm going to think she's stupid or whatever else when she says these things. Right. And so when we become confident in that, we say our jokes boldly. Like you could be literally the funniest comedian in the world, but if you got up there and you were and saying your stuff, like if the joke's not going to come across funny, half of the way that I would say a good portion of the way comedians are successful is their delivery, right? They're just so confident in their delivery that that's what makes the joke funny. But like, if they told me that joke and I got up in there, I'm pretty confident in myself. I just wouldn't be as good as them because they're professional comedians. But if you give it to somebody who's like maybe that person who I was talking about who didn't know why his wife fell in love with him, you give that person the joke, he's going to get up there and it's not going to be funny at all, even though that same joke told by, I don't know, a great comedian just killed, right? It wouldn't be funny because he's not confident in who he is, right? And now, granted, that person's not a comedian, so it's totally different, but it does give ourselves permission. Whereas I really do look at myself now, I look at Dianne, I look at a lot of other people that and just be like, I could see you doing anything in life. Maybe you're not killing it in that area right now. You would just learn it because of who you are right now. You just know what you're really good at, and you've had to learn to grow where you're at, that you'll be able to really do anything. If I just said, babe, you need to become, or at me saying you need to become, but like, let's just say she said, I want to become this, or maybe she doesn't even know she wants and somebody challenged her. She could become literally anything. I've watched it happen. I've watched it happen myself, and I've watched with a lot of people we work with when they're really about that life, right?
Right.
And so I think that's where, when I said that's one of the reasons I fell in love with you is funny because I think you had glimpses of it. I just think that after a while you like muzzled that for a long time. Is we don't often know when we're mediocre in life. We just think that that's the new normal. It's just the same way somebody who's 350 pounds doesn't necessarily, I think they think that it possibly would feel better if they were 175, but they don't really know because that's the new normal of where they're at. And so they probably go, well, I'm pretty happy with where I'm at, and God bless you. I hope you are. But there is new levels when you can just have your body running more optimally, right? It's not about necessarily looks. It's about how your body's running optimally. And so same thing when we just get living these mediocre lives, if we don't know who we are, we kind of think like, well, I don't really think I need to know who I am. Like I'm a pretty good dad. I got a pretty good job. I got my 401k and I got this retirement and I get to go on two vacations a year. And like, it's like, man, that's all you're living for? Like there's so much more to life than that. Like, man, that sounds pretty boring to me. That if that was a brochure, I'm definitely not buying from you. If you're a timeshare, I'm not buying from you, bro. Or lady, like either one of those, I'm not going to buy because that doesn't sound interesting. And I know I'm different than a lot of people, but I think we all have, well, I know we all have greatness inside of us, and not greatness to compare to anybody else, but greatness to compare to ourself of who we were yesterday. And then we go get those new levels. And so it was just really cool as we started talking about things. We actually, I'm sure most of you guys listening to this have read The 5 Love Languages. If you hadn't, it's a great book in a lot of different ways. And we haven't taken the test in a long, long, long time. And honestly, I don't even remember if I ever did, but I think when I read the book, I was like, oh, well, that's obvious. My two main ones, I would say, is 1000% affirmations. And my second one would be physical touch, is what I always told everybody on our coaching calls and all of that. Like, that's what I told everybody. And so decided today, we were like, let's retake that test because we were going to have our kids do it. So if you guys have kids, teenagers, or anybody, I would probably say above 6 years old, really take that test and see what your kids' love languages are, because we could be serving them in one way because that's how our cup gets filled up.
Or how we just think that theirs does.
And it could be so totally different, which is why it's so important to do it as a couple.
Yeah.
Because what serves me might not serve Dianne. I'm going to get into that in a second, but a lot of couples don't have similar ones. And so they're like, well, I don't understand. Like, I'm okay with not having physical touch or maybe that much intimacy. Like, why is it so important to you? And they get frustrated because they're completely different. Humans are literally as different as a computer and a car, right? Like they're that different. Even though we look somewhat similar and we're all have similar body parts for the most, right? 99% of them, we're drastically different because our brains are so different. And so what was cool though is we took the test today, and I went first, Dianne went second, and our list was almost identical. So
it was very similar. And in mine, I had taken it years ago, and I remembered what my number one was, and it was different this time. But I think as we grow and evolve into ourselves and change, that those can change too. I feel like your personalities, your wants, your needs, as you really become into yourself, can change. Are you looking up your love language?
Yeah, I'm looking at my love language.
I'll look at mine too.
Well, basically, so both of ours was I know. So my first one was quality time at 33%.
Mine's quality time, 37%.
My second one was words of affirmation at 30%.
Which is interesting because mine's physical touch at 33%.
Which is weird. But physical touch is mine for third for 20%. Acts of service 17%, and receiving gifts was 0%. Like 0%, which is so true. I could care less. Like I appreciate when people give me things. Don't get me wrong. I'm definitely appreciative, but it literally does almost nothing for me.
Mine was 0% too. So
yeah, same with Dianne. That's why we literally don't get each other gifts ever, because it's like, dude, we know that doesn't mean anything to us.
Yeah.
And so Diane's second to last one was acts of service at 10%.
And
like
words of affirmation, third one was 20%. So
right. So basically, we're both quality time, which really surprised me. But then when we were looking at it, I was like, well, no wonder, because we both have, I thought physical touch, right? And it would have been years ago, it would have been totally physical touch, because honestly, for years, me and Dianne didn't have much in common. Like if we went out to dinner, after we talked about the kids or how good the food was, we pretty much didn't have anything to talk about. Like,
it was like,
not that we it was awkward. It was just like, it was simple.
Yeah.
And then now we literally spend almost all day, every day, because we work together and go to the gym together, eat dinner together, do
pretty much
everything together. Like literally when I was answering those questions, it was like, oh, wow. I was already telling myself halfway through the quiz, I think my thing's going to be quality time. But the cool part about that is the way I kind of analyzed it was, because quality time is number one, that means that we have great conversations, right? We're just not watching TV. Like we rarely watch TV together. It's not our thing anymore. We used to, but it's just not our thing anymore. So we have such good conversations that we're doing things together, recreational things, physical things. We're coaching. We're doing all of that we get to see each other and get to know each other so much that I would have thought physical touch would have been so much higher. But it's why we're been together for 24 years and sex is better than it's ever been. And we're still consistent at 3 to 4 times a week. And we've been together for 24 years. So you can imagine how many times we've had sex in our life. A lot, right? But at the same time, how is it getting better? Because we have value that quality time so much that we know each other so intimately that when we make love, it's so much more than just like, yo, you want to go knock one out? Like, don't get me wrong. I'm a man just like anybody else.
We do that every now and then if we do
we'll have a nice night.
We have a little quick moment, but
sure. But that also is just because that's just part of the repertoire of like, we still like to pleasure each other in those things. And it's more of serving each other. We were talking about this earlier today that, and I know this kind of gets deep on a lot of these things, is that I enjoy sex. The part for me that I enjoy the most is pleasing Dianne more than anything. Like that's my favorite part of it. Myself is second during that. Right. I love just pleasing, watching her be in pleasure. And so that's what I'm about, right? Like, that's part of being in service to other people, right? And so if that's my number one thing, then I know then for me, that's why I should have known that physical touch was a little bit lower, because that's why I'm doing it is for her, to fill up her cup. But it was cool so when you have quality time as number one, I guarantee all those other ones just fall into place. When you're giving gifts, if gifts is your number one thing, now, gifts can be multiple things, right? Like they could be sentimental ones.
Yeah, I could have a couple of different meanings a little bit.
But if you're like, hey, I'm buying you a purse, I'm buying you a car, I'm buying you diamond earrings, things that like, okay, come on. Like, I'm not trying to be a jerk. Like, I know those things hit home for different people, but those aren't really all that sentimental. But I'm saying like something that was like on the first date, or you're leaving notes and things around for them, or you're doing different things like that. That's a little bit different of giving gifts. But if you're just showing your love by giving somebody a gift, and I think if their number one is giving gifts, this is going to sound a little crazy with that at the same time, like maybe ruffle some feathers. I think that you're missing a little bit in how you communicate, getting vulnerable with your spouse. You probably have had some areas of your life where you've struggled in other things.
I agree. It's like lacking of something else. And so when you're lacking in one area, you're taking it up another. And I think that giving gifts is kind of like filling a void a little bit.
But that's ways. Receiving them or giving them.
Yeah. Receiving them, I should say.
I think that's where I was talking about, was mainly the receiving part. But as the giver, I've watched this happen so much, and I see it a lot in a lot of relationships, especially from people who are very successful in business. They work so much that they feel guilty about working so much that they just, the way to, because they're not giving that quality time, is to give their spouse something, to try to make up for it, or give their kids something to try to make up for it.
Right.
And eventually those kids, that's the way they've been raised to accept love, and then it can put that for them at the top. And I've watched it happen in my family. You know, my father and I have a very weird relationship. And, maybe he wasn't, just to be real, he wasn't a good husband. And still, still is. It's just, I don't want to go too deep, but at the same time, every single time he did something wrong, every single time he would buy my mom something, whether it was just flowers, oftentimes it was a car, or if it was a giant thing that he did wrong, it would be buy a new house. Not saying they had multiple, but they would sell the one that, let's get a new house. And it was always something, we got to get these new cars, or I got to buy you this or buy you that. Instead of just being like, man, like, I'm going to give you me. I'm going to give you my heart. I'm going to give you this, right? Instead of like, hey, I'm just going to try to buy you back, right? And so that's where the gifts comes in for me. That's a little bit weird on that one, because I think all the other ones are great, right? Like acts of service shows love, right? Quality time is love. Physical touch is love, but I think the gifts one, to me, is a little bit that one.
If it's materialistic type of gifts, I feel like you were saying, if it's sentimental, it's like really, that's showing your heart, that's showing your soul, that's showing your love and caring in a different way.
It is. So it had that so well said on the sentimental part of it. So yeah, this wasn't about that, but I just wanted to touch more on like the who you are, right? Because the point of that is that it's crazy how we've became these people, and now we've blended we've to become one, as the Bible says, and we've become that, and it's really, really cool what's happening in our relationship. And just where we're at in our faith life and our business and our parenting and our friendships and our alignments, all of that, it took a long time to get here. But when you're willing to pay the price, good things come, right? There's the old adage, good things happen for those who wait, right? Like delayed gratification is such a true thing. So many people quit their marriage early on. That's divorce rates 50% because it's like, well, it's hard times. And then they think they try, when they really don't. They think they need to go to a traditional marriage counselor and they're going to talk through their problems. Well, their problems are only happening because of what's going on in them individually. Believe me, we've worked with plenty of people who started at traditional counseling and were like, dude, that made it worse.
Yeah.
Literally.
Hashing out our problems over and over again. The same problems does not bring resolution a lot of times.
It doesn't, right? Like,
it doesn't work for everybody. Maybe it works for some people, but it doesn't work for everybody.
I think that you got to talk a little bit, like, know where they've been.
Yeah.
But you don't have to keep going back there, right? And really going, okay, well, let's figure out why that was happening, right? And like, what's really going on with you now? What's the roadblocks from having you be moved forward in both of your guys' lives? Typically, it has nothing to do with their spouse. It's always with them in some way, shape, or form. It always is. And once we figure that out, it's really cool. And so knowing who we are is so important. I can't tell you, like, once you figure that out and you're unapologetic about it, that's the biggest thing. Is so many people in this society these days, with the woke country we live in these days, don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And so what do? They dumb down their beliefs. They dumb down who they are because they feel like if this is who I am, it's going to hurt somebody else's feelings. And I don't want to do that, which I get is a nice thought. But in the end is killing yourself. And because you're killing yourself, what's that going to do? It's going to kill you as a parent. It's going to kill you as a business owner or an employee. It's going to kill your marriage because you're not being your true self. You're being what we call the Mr. Nice Guy syndrome. And that goes for women as well. When you're not being your true self, that means you're never going to be fully happy. That means the things you are saying aren't always going to be consistent because it's going to be based off your feelings and emotions rather than your commitment to who you truly are, right? And then you're going to be all over the place. So you're not being who you truly are. I would rather hang out with somebody who has different beliefs and values than me, but at least I know that's who they truly are, rather than somebody who's just kind of telling me what I want to hear. I don't want to, you hear that all the time in circles with successful people. They have yes men in their circle. I don't want a yes man. I want friends that tell me the truth. I want a wife that tells me the truth. And that's what's really cool. I have a friend of mine who's been one of my best friends in my life right now, and I've only known him for 8 months. Most of my best friends in my life right now I've only known for 8 months because I just happened to join a coaching group where we all just became brothers. And this guy flew into Vegas. He was here for a convention and only had a couple hours to hang. So we went and got a workout in. And during that probably 2 hour workout, he called me out 3 times on things. And that was awesome. Rather than just being tooting my horn, like he called me out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like on some things that I needed to change or beliefs about myself or in the business. It was awesome. And I grew a ton just from a 2 hour workout with him. I was like, that's a real friend. He's not a yes man.
Right. He's not just saying, "Oh, sure, that's great. Oh, yeah, you're fine. Uh-huh."
Yeah. And so when you know who you are, your spouse is going to be like, yo, I want some of that. Like, let me get some of that. And that's for real. That's for real. I guarantee if you're having intimacy issues in your relationship, one of the things is you're not fully, truly loving, compassionately firm and bold in who you are. And when you understand that and you're okay with that, when somebody says something negative to you or about your character, you don't believe it because you know who you are and what you stand for. And so all your actions, if you're doing it right, follow suit on that. So when somebody calls you a piece of crap, you're like, okay, I'm sorry that you think that way, but I know different.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not us saying that we're perfect, but I know my core values. I know whose I am. I know what I stand for, and I know that I'm a man of my word, and I back up every single thing that I say. And I know Diane does the same thing. And so, like we've said, sex has gotten better 24 years later, right? Why? Because we've both grown, and I know who Diane is when I see her. I see somebody that's just not a hot body with a nice booty, right? Like, I don't go like, oh yeah, but which she, don't take this wrong way, which she does have. But at the same time, like for me, it's like I see my wife and I see a strong, confident, independent woman who's a leader, who's a child of God, who's an amazing mom and wife, who will be a loyal friend. And when I see that, and somebody who does what they say, I see that every single time she walks into a room. You don't think that turns you on? That does for me. Now let's do a flip side, right? I already know it goes the other way. That's a no-brainer, right? And I'm not saying because, like, oh, I'm like, blah, 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 because I
No.
know that's the same thing.
1000% goes the exact same.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When you see your spouse, when your spouse sees you living your truth and in your greatness, it's attractive. Let's say you're settling for a job because it has a nice retirement plan and it pays you good money, but yet you're not happy. And you come home and you're just stressed from that day of work and your boss is just this the terrible person and you hate the customers and all of this, but hey, maybe you're making 7 figures and your bank account's nice. You have this nice big house and you pull up in a nice car, you go on nice vacations, but you're just stressed every day. And so when you come home, you just want to have a meal and maybe have a beer and sit on the couch and just zone out. Do you think your marriage is killing it? No, it's not.
No.
And so when you finally do talk to your spouse, it's probably, how was your day? Ugh. Oh my gosh, and then you just go in, and when you're whining and complaining, it's like, dude, that's the biggest turnoff. Now that's different between sharing your vulnerable feelings when those moments randomly and occasionally happen. But if you're just living, if you're settling for a job that you hate, that's not being truly who you are.
Right.
Because your unique talents will serve you for who you are, and you'll go live that life. You'll find that job. And people say, yeah, but this is where I make the most money, and you got to have insurance and you got all that. Do you not trust God to provide that when you go do what he created you to do? And if you don't, then you're not a Christian. Or if you might be a Christian, but you're not a kingdom-driven Christian who's really about that life. Because you're saying that I believe in God and I know he died on the cross, but I don't really believe anything in the Bible that says he will make you prosper, right? When you're doing all of this stuff, right? You're just somebody who's saying, well, I don't, you got to do all of this. You're leaning on the world saying it's more important for you to go get the insurance and the 401k and the safe job than saying God will provide that when I go and I stand out in my truth. No wonder God's not providing for you in those areas because you're not trusting him with it.
Yeah, you're concentrating more on the worldly things instead of trusting in God.
And I only know that because that was me until I was about 38, 39 years old. Now, I have done entrepreneurial stuff for about 7, 8 years before it, but never full gas. And when we went full gas, we went from being, like we're saying, mediocre to being honestly one of the biggest industry leaders in our industry, right? Locking arms with so many amazing people around the world, growing a massive following with impact, right? Our people we used to look up to are now our brothers and our sisters and that are rubbing elbows with them, right? It's crazy because when God finally blessed us, when we finally say, God, okay, I'm going to use who we truly are and who you created to me to be for you, instead of me saying, well, I'm going to play it safe because I know where my paycheck comes from, you know? And so when you know who you are and you stand in that, and especially when your spouse does it, then it's just rocket fuel. But when you do it on your own, you're giving your marriage a 50% better shot than what it has, even if they're not doing it. But chances are, if you're doing that for long enough, they'll catch up in your draft. That's what happened with Dianne for a little while. But we honestly really, I was maybe a little bit ahead in some areas, but we had to make the bold moves at the same time.
It's true. Yeah. We had to make the bold moves at the same time. You just leveled up a little bit earlier than I did.
So that's where I beg to differ is that.
And then I followed your lead.
Excuse me, getting a drink of water there. That's where I just beg to differ is that we're always our worst critics, right? Like, I'm just more of the talkative, creative type. And what God's created me for is a little bit different than what Dianne is created for. So she doesn't see, by you saying that you're not seeing your greatness because you're comparing to me, well,
That's
I'm
true.
not on stages and I'm not doing this. So I'm not that great.
And
right?
I might never be. So I can't compare that.
Right. So she's doing this. Now, do I see her on stages eventually? Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I do. I actually do. And so that's where her limiting beliefs are still coming in.
No, I just don't see necessarily that might not be me.
Her thing. It might not
It's hard
be.
to say. We'll see.
Yeah.
In time.
So what we were talking about earlier today is that we're just yeses for whatever God has in our life.
That's right.
If you're struggling in life at all with stress or anxiety or fear, you haven't given God the wheel fully. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, when you say, God, I fully trust you, if you want to make us bankrupt, if you want to have us living in our car, if you want take everything from us, it's a yes.
Yeah.
It's a yes. And one of the biggest prayers that I've been praying that's changed our life this year is break me. And that took me a long time to pray it. But when I did, I watched huge things happen. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying I want to go live in a car and make us bankrupt and all of that. But what I'm saying is sometimes we need to have those hurtful moments for us to be able to grow. Now, we've had them in a lot of other areas, and so I feel like we're past those to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. But when you're unattached fully to your emotions of like, oh, well, I'm in until God dips into my bank account, or I'm in until my health dips, or I'm in until this happens, then I will reassess. When you're in no matter what, like when he asked Abraham to put Isaac on the altar, and you show that type of faith, God's like, he's making it rain on you. And I'm not talking just financially. I'm talking like in peace, in happiness, in alignments, in your marriage, and all those other things. But you got to be really, 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 really getting there. And I'm not talking just talking the talk. You got to be about that smoke. You got to want that smoke. And when you do, good things are going to happen. So that's figuring out who you are and what you want. What is it that you want? You know? All I want, I put this in the stories last night, is I used to desire when I was younger, pills and fame and all this other stuff and women. All I want now is just Jesus. Mm-hmm. Now, that's number one. I just want to get him to know that. And of course, I want my wife and my kids and all that other stuff. But like, that's all I want is Jesus. And I know when I'm close to him that all that other stuff is just easy peasy. And so that's what I want, right? I just want to be effective. I put that in my stories today as well. I used to want to be famous, use my platform to be famous. And now I'm just using my platform to be effective. That's all that matters. And that's so I know what I want and I know who I am. But ask yourself, do you really know who you are? If somebody said today, whatever your name is, yo, whoever, who are you? Can you rattle that off? Why did your spouse fall in love with you? Can you rattle that off? What is it that you want? Can you rattle that off? If it's a no, don't beat yourself up, but figure it out.
Right.
And the way you're going to figure that out is by trial and error, by deciding to be the best, being absolutely the best, not better than everybody else, better than yourself.
Every day.
Playing for an audience of one for God and just being better than yourself, because that's the only person I can be better than. Like, you know, so when people talk about you can be the best ever, yes, you can, of yourself. I can be the best Tommy ever. I can't maybe necessarily be the best basketball player ever, right? Because I'm going to have some limitations in that areas, right? Could have if all I focused on, I knew that's what God had for my life and gone and did it. Sure, I could maybe did something like that. Possibly, sure, yeah, absolutely. I believe that because I know we can do whatever. That's just not what my gifts are. But I'm gonna be the best version of myself, and so figure that out for yourself of what you can and can't, of what you can do, right, and what you want, of who you are. So ask yourself right now, who am I? Boom, rattle it off, right? What you want, rattle it off. And you want to get to that point and then live it fully. Live it fully, not just a little bit, fully. And it's going to take you a little bit to get to this level of conviction. And I'm not like, don't take that as tooting my horn. We've just been doing it now for a while. So it just
we weren't always here. So
it just takes a while. So give yourself some grace, but just as long as you're being 1% better every day and you're just consistent and non-negotiable and fully trusting God and not working out of spite or try to prove other people wrong. Cause that was me for so long. I worked out of spite and I tried to prove everybody wrong. Guess what? That ran out. And when that runs out, you're in a dark place. And eventually when you're doing it for the right reasons, it's peaceful. Because if you're like, don't win that day for whatever reasons, you don't feel bad because you know you did your best. And you didn't go, dang it, now what's this person going to think of me? Because I don't care. I don't care. And that's when we're awesome, when we're bold. That's when my spouse can look at me and be like, she knows what the words out of my mouth are truly me. Do we get hate online? Absolutely, because people don't like bold people. Mm-hmm. But do we get a lot of love online? Absolutely. But guess what? Neither of those for me move my emotion meter. Not that I'm not thankful for those people who say that I truly am, because affirmations is my number 2 love language. I'm definitely thankful for those people. But what God showed me was it shouldn't move whether I'm getting hate or it shouldn't move whether I'm getting love, because either way I know who I am and what I want. So that's when I know it. That's when I knew I was right in the right zone. So figure that out for yourself. I'm not going to do that little exercise because we've been going for a little bit now. And so I don't want to do that little exercise. But, if any of you are having a hard time figuring that out, I'm just going to challenge you, like, reach out. We work with a very exclusive group of people. I'm not going to like say, oh yeah, it's like a budget for everybody. We do have an entry level program that can be, it's definitely still a buy-in, investment in yourself. But our top tier program is exclusive because we only have so much bandwidth, and we like to give so much energy to our clients. We don't have just a huge stable of people. I'm not gonna joke. It's an investment. But if that's you, there's zero price that you can ever put on feeling, knowing who you are and what you want. Just in the past 3 years alone, we spent $85,000 on our personal coaching for ourselves. Why? Because it's invaluable. And I regret spending not a cent of that.
No, not at all.
And if you asked me years ago if I'd spent 85 grand on coaching,
I would have thought you were crazy.
And I remember one time, like I spent $150 on something like that. And I was like, oh my God, this is so much money. Right. And I'm not saying that I spent 85 grand. That's just like all excess money that I was just like, oh, I could have got a Porsche instead. I was really trying to choose between a Porsche and that coaching. And like,
no, our first coaching program, we sold a car to get.
Yeah. We literally sold our second car to get it. And literally with a family of 4, I had to roll a 1 car. Like we literally had to unscrew light bulbs around the house. We literally had to not go out to dinner and not buy clothes and not do things like that. Cut off our cable, everything to get it, right? Because we knew what we wanted to become, but we just didn't know how to become that. And that's okay. God can do all that for you on his own, but then you don't have free will. And God doesn't want to do that just all on his own. He wants you to align you with people who are doing it. So then you have community, which is why the number 2 commandment in the Bible is love your neighbor as yourself. And so that's why I love my people that have led me there, right? But that's why we're doing it too. That's why we've been doing it for so long. It's because we just we know who we are and what we want. And so that's where we challenge you. When you figure that out and you're just sturdy, it doesn't matter what the world's doing on you. When it throws pandemics and it throws all this other stuff at you and you watched people crumble, it doesn't matter what the world will throw at you because you know who you are and whose you are and what you stand for. The world will throw everything at you trying to knock you down. And you'll be like, oh, did something hit me? You won't even waver. I promise you, you won't waver. And when you get to that point, the sky's the limit for yourself, for the kingdom, especially your marriage. And there's nothing stronger in this world than having an amazing marriage when 2 people truly become one. I'm speaking it from existence. And when I say this, I'll put our marriage up against everybody's. And I'm not saying that to brag, because I know what God's done with us and the platform he's given us to be able to work through the problems that we've had. Adultery early on, 20 years ago, boom, me, right? Drug addiction years ago, me, right? Losing careers and doing things like that, me. Draining our bank account, trying to grow business accounts, me, right? Dianne being super mediocre for 19 years, her, right? Like, and she'll speak the same thing. So I don't think I'm just throwing shade
No,
on her.
not at all.
Right? So I don't care where you're at. God did all of that. Let us go through all of that. Because he says in Romans 8:28, God uses all things for good, and he's doing that. And then now he's saying, yo, let's use your marriage to be a blessing. Just the same way my parents' marriage was a blessing to us, even though it was arguably one of the worst marriages in history. Why? Why did he use that for a blessing? Because he said in Romans 8:28, God uses all things for good. He showed me what not to do, and I became a generational chain breaker to do this. Diane's parents were divorced very early on, right?
Yeah.
Then her mom found an amazing, amazing man after that. Are we saying go get divorced and go find an amazing man or a woman? No, fight for it. Had her dad been willing to change at that time and know who he was
Right.
and what he was about, that might have not happened.
Right. But it's a blessing that it did.
At that time, because he wasn't
Yeah.
willing to do it. And, you know, to a certain
Yeah.
extent, I love the guy, but he's still who he is today. And there's a
Yeah.
reason why he's where he's at today at 70 something years old. And he's just kind of been there. And it's kind of sad to see, because he's chosen that, because he didn't go figure out who he was and what he wanted in life.
And was not willing to change.
Yeah. Because it's scary to change, but nothing's scarier than being 5 years down the road in the exact same spot or worse. And we've seen it time and time again. So if you're looking to lock arms, reach out to us. Like, literally reach out to us, highlevelhusband@gmail.com, or just hit me up on Instagram is usually the best way, or Dianne. So it's under Tommy McCollister or Dianne McCollister on Instagram. Go there and shoot us a DM, and we can get you on a clarity call and dive deep on some stuff. But there's greatness awaiting you. And I know we can be passionate on here, but I'll tell you what, you could talk to each and every one of our clients that we work with around the world, and every single one of them will tell you that our heart is in the right place and that we care tremendously about each of the people we work with. I'm just a bold person, but I can get going on this just because,
You're passionate about what you do, and you're passionate about serving other people and helping people be the best that they can be.
Same with you, babe. But we also know where we were.
Yeah.
And that's
You know, it's possible.
You know, when somebody asked me recently what it is, my mission is to help people who are living an unfulfilled life live a fulfilled life in marriage through Christ. That's my mission. Why? Because I lived it. And so when I speak boldly of this, it's because I was hurting for so many years, and I thought that was the end. And it's not. And the cool thing is God made us wait, right? Because then people wouldn't say later on, well, of course you love God because look at your business and look what you get to do. You get to do what you want for a living. You have this following, and look, you got this money and all these other things. It's easy to serve God with that, but you've never gone through what I've gone through. Oh yeah? Well, then when God starts us off, because you're just seeing the end of the movie. You didn't see the beginning of the movie where we were getting crushed by life, but God allowed us to be crushed. So then now we could be here. So then we can really speak the truth of what God is and will do for you. And when we get to that spot, then it's game on. So stop just reading the end of the movie and stop seeing here, and understanding that, well, there's going to be more movies made after this, but the beginning of the movie was us being crushed. So much love. We're going to end this one here. Go and give us a follow on social media. We dive deeper, especially on IG and our stories. We're always keeping it fun and showing behind the scenes. We obviously put all of our content out, a lot of great tips and helpful stuff on our regular reels and our posts. And if you want to work with us, reach out. Let's make it happen. And if you got some fear in that, good, because that's what means that you're facing everything you want in life is on the other side of pain and fear. And once you really just start facing those and saying, yes, anything is the limit. There's no limits in your life. Anything's possible. So we love you, and we truly want you to want the best. May God bless you. Go out and live an abundant day and know that God loves you more than you can ever imagine. Much love.
Bye.